Hey everyone, this is David D. Hilster, and I'm coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida. It's 10 a.m. in the morning Eastern Standard Time, and I welcome everybody from the CMPS. Those of people who are also watching on my Dissident Science channel, I want to welcome everybody. I'm going to be hosting today a really great talk from a person who he has just published his book. I got it right here, in fact. He published the book, which we talked about last week, The Hidden History of Earth Expansion, uh, told by researchers creating a modern theory of the Earth. It was really great. If you haven't seen it, you can go to either channel. We have a couple of places you can watch it. You can go to youtube.naturalphilosophy.org and you can see the recording of the live session there. Or you can also go to youtube.disciplinescience.com and see it there as well. I'm broadcasting live to both of those channels today, exposing some of my over 3,000 subscribers to the CMPS and what it's doing, as well as those people in the CMPS who are here every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Time. In England time, I think it's at 3 p.m. So you don't want to miss this. We also have another um, website you can go to if you want to learn more about the the John Chappell Natural Philosophy uh, uh, Society, which was actually founded in the early 1990s. It was at that time known as the Natural Philosophy Alliance. It changed names in 2015, and we have a database of over 10,000 pages of people working outside the mainstream, including hundreds of books and thousands of articles and thousands of scientists and their profiles. So you want to check that out if you're from the Dissident Science channel. Also, again, if you are from Dissident Science, again, I'm welcome you. And you can go and check out this organization, the CMPS. I'm one of the directors of the CMPS. That's how I got involved in all this. So it's great organization. And also we have we have the two websites, naturalphilosophy.org and we have sciencewoke.org. Now, sciencewoke.org is a place you can go if you're not so technically inclined. It is an online news magazine for those people who are uh, uh, I'm sorry, it's an online newspaper magazine for critical thinkers written in a more popular news style. So I think you're going to really enjoy that. If you haven't been there, it really breaks things down for you. What's wrong with science? We even have a problems area. We have the scientists who are the newer scientists outside the mainstream. You get a little interesting bios about them and works and lots of interesting articles. So again, I welcome you and believe it or not, I do have the slides here, but I don't have the speakers not yet has joined us. I've sent him a message because he's in England. It's 3 p.m. I don't know if it's a problem people can have sometimes with the internet, but he definitely knows about it because he sent me these slides. So the CMPS 18, July 20, can we calculate paleogravity? Now, it is an amazing talk. What is paleogravity? Well, paleogravity is the study of the strength of gravity through ancient times and ancient rocks, whether it's geological or it's fossils, based on fossils. He's going to be talking about the fossils today. But we are still, unfortunately, waiting for him. Now, I would just say uh, that in case he doesn't show up, I'm not sure. I can go through it because I know his talk. I've seen this. I think he has even a video about it. But I certainly don't want to usurp him. But normally he's on, comes on a lot earlier than this. But he comes on beforehand. No, normally my guests will do that. But if you do want to check out um, the website from Stephen Hurrell, you can, Hurrell. You can do so by going to this website, dinox.org. And so we're really looking forward to this talk, and hopefully we will have him join any minute. So I will check my emails just in case, but I see people are joining in our lobby, and of course, people are waiting for this pretty interesting talk. Now, for those of you who are new, I know right now I can see people from both the CMPS and we do have counts of people who are watching. Again, I want to welcome everybody from Dissident Science and also CMPS, the Natural Philosophy .org. Um, Expansion tectonics, for those who are not familiar with it, talks about the Earth and the plate tectonics actually are not floating around and moving, but are actually fixed, and the Earth's radius is growing. So what we see as growth in the oceans and growth around uh, uh, for instance, Antarctica, all of those plates in the mid ridges are actually adding new ocean floor all the time, and expansion tectonics says, well, that is not being subducted. There is some subduction, but very little subduction, meaning the plates are growing, and then those plates are growing. They'll dive into or subduction would be while they're growing in the middle of the ocean here, and they're moving along. Then they go under. They subduct like this. That's what mainstream science says. That's the what we call plate tectonics, that the plates are moving around sort of almost willy-nilly, driven by currents underneath in the magma. And but expansion tectonics says that in fact, no, they're not even moving at all. What's happening is the plates about 250 million years ago cracked, and the expansion started expanding. The Earth has been expanding for billions of years actually, and during those billions of years we have the expansion going on, cracking the plates, and as the Earth gets bigger, the plates are separating, water's filling in through those mid-oceanic ridges, water's pumping through. You can see that you can go on, look up black smokers, you'll see that water's pouring out of these things in the mid-ocean ridges where new ocean floor is being made, and that has given rise to the theory of expansion tectonics, which actually plate tectonics and expansion tectonics were more or less equal in the early 1960s, and then the geological community decided that both of them were radical, but they'd rather go with the plate tectonics because the idea that the Earth's expanding and gaining mass was just too much, I think, for them to take. So again, we're waiting for Steve Hurrell. This is the talk he's going to be giving. Again, if this doesn't happen, let's see what time it is. It's now 10:08. But we'll be waiting for him I'm going to give him 2 more minutes. If not, then what I'll do is I'm going to go through his talk with the slides, and I will try to interpret them the best I can because people are coming to see this. So anyways, I want to welcome everybody again. Let's see, do we have him trying to connect yet? Oh, yes, I do. Device is not connected. Okay, so he is trying to connect. It sounds like he's having problems, or maybe he didn't really know how to connect, but he is in a little bit north of Liverpool in the UK, so we are waiting for him. So I see him trying to connect, which is a good sign. But I also know today and age, the way it's going with the crisis and everything going on with the virus, the networks are always being strained. I know I'm a computer scientist by trade, and networks are being strained to the max. I'm trying to get my video here right. There we go. But the networks are really being strained because so many people are working from home. Um, I do. Okay, he has been trying to connect. So, anyways, I just want to say hello to some people here who are sitting in. I'm gonna. I did this to Ian before. Hey, Ian, I'm gonna bring you up here. So, hey, how are you? Oops, he's gone. That's funny. We are definitely having problems with people connecting. So I just tried to connect him. I'm hoping everybody can hear me correctly and fine. Uh, anyways, good morning, everybody. If you are listening, I see people imagining if they couldn't hear me, they'd say something. Well, we got Stephen Hurrell. We have Ian. Ian was popping in, but I think Stephen is looking like he is coming to it again. If you want to check out Stephen's work, go to dinox.org. Um, and let's see if we can. Oh, I think we are getting the man himself. Let me make sure I can hear audio. Headphones. Okay, I should. Okay, so I'm going to see if we can bring him up. All right, Stephen, are you there? He may be muted. Sounds like he's having problems maybe with his connection. You can see it's slow there. Now you just do your voice. You may, because if you're having connections, Stephen,
Oh,
you you may want to just turn off your video, and we can just hear you, because sometimes that will help. In the Again, we're with Stephen Hurrell. If you're looking for Can We Calculate Paleogravity, we're here to talk about how ancient fossils will tell us a little bit about what the strength of gravity was. And I think you're going to be very surprised. It's really a compelling evidence. And there we go. So say hello, Stephen. Hello. We're still not hearing. Oh, I'm hearing him type, or maybe that's
okay.
somebody else. Are, are you there? Hello. One, two, three. Apologize, folks. This is the new world we live in. So, hello? One, two, three. Testing. Mr. Stephen Hurrell is how he spells it. Hurrell is the way he pronounces it. Not Hurrell, but he said he'll accept either way. Are you there?
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm hearing you now. Say something.
Uh, Stop.
Oh, he's not hearing us, I think. I think that's the problem. Sometimes what happens with this is he does not hear you. We are waiting to talk about, can we calculate paleogravity? So we're almost there, hopefully. Stephen, if you're hearing me, if you're not hearing me, then you may want to connect and disconnect and come back again. But hello, Stephen, are you there? I'm hearing you.
Um,
I'm hearing you.
yes, I can. Yeah, it seems
Okay.
very working as well as it did last week.
Yeah, it sounds like you're having problems with your internet connection where you are.
Oh,
Hello?
hello, David. Yes,
Yes? Yes?
it's
Can you?
nice to be back again this week.
Okay, well, we'll just start out with your slides. Can you see the slides, and can we begin? Just let me know when you want to switch slides.
Yes, I can just about hear you.
Okay, go ahead.
Just seeing a bit. Um,
Yeah, we're not being able to hear you. It's cutting in and out constantly. Maybe I can get people in our
I don't
lobby, which are
think
sitting in our lobby, to
you
maybe perhaps turn
can
off
hear me
their.
too.
I can hear you, but it's coming through very sporadically. I think the connection is really, really slow. So they try to, do their best they can. But maybe if people in the lobby also can turn off their videos,
Yes.
because not you already did, but maybe other people as well. That may be something that could help the. I know Dennis is there. Ian, if you guys could turn off your videos for now, we greatly appreciated. I think maybe a few connections may help. I don't know. Can you say? Can you talk again? Say something, Stephen.
I, shall I go on the next?
I'm sorry. Do you have maybe a telephone you could use? Because this works also on telephone, or because right now your internet connection is not working for us to get you to be able to be able to hear you at all. We're not hearing you. We'll hear you once in a while.
Hello.
Huh? Hello, hello. Did you want to try to join again and come back in, or
I
I think he did that. Again, I apologize. These things do happen. Stick around because either way, we're going to go through the slides, whether it's myself or hopefully with Stephen, because it'd be much more interesting. I appreciate those people in the live lounge turning off their videos. What really is happening here is the connection from his side isn't working out. Last week it was working out fine. This week not so not so fine. I know how that is. Our internet goes down, our electricity goes down, etc. So I do have a faster connection because I work from home and I am a computer guy, so I need the good connection. So hopefully we'll have him popping back in very shortly. So we'll start this, and if not, then well, I'm not sure if we should give it a try to go through his talk or not, but that would be my intention. All right. So again, if you just tuned in, don't tune out. What's happening? We're having a little connection problems with our main speaker, Stephen Hurrell. Have you haven't gotten or read his book or no? Take a look at. Let me put his website up again. You can go to his website and get all the information about this. But this is his latest book, The Hidden History of Expansion, Earth Expansion, told by researchers creating modern theory of the Earth. It does support the expansion tectonics theory, which a lot of us, once you look at the data, it's really hard to believe that the Earth isn't expanding. But we're waiting for him to join up because he's going to be giving a talk today about can we calculate paleogravity. Again, paleogravity is the science, I guess, or the study of the strength of gravity through Paleolithic times, all the way back as many as billions of years ago. And he's got a really interesting talk talking about animals, in this case, dinosaurs, and their bones and their mass. Quite interesting, where you can chart it, and believe it or not, charting that will actually line up with a lot of the other people in expansion tectonics that looked at gravity and just in different ways, and ends up supporting a lot of other people who are into the expansion tectonics. So, alrighty, still not joining up yet. Um, alrighty, let me. What I'll do is I'll slowly go through these. Hopefully, he will come here. But can we calculate? Let's start out with the slides today. And can we calculate paleogravity? And hopefully, if he comes, then we can go back through the slides. But this is his definition for paleogravity. Paleogravity, the strength of the Earth's surface gravity in the past. Again, the idea is that gravity itself isn't changing, but the gravity on the surface of the Earth changes. And of course, you'll have a question about that. And that question is that the right one? Yeah. That question is, okay, what is gravity? Well, it's weight over mass, of course, on Earth, 1g. That's why we call it g. G is a constant that we came up to be able to easily calculate gravitational force. Of course, on the moon, it's 1/6g. And on other planets, it can be either higher or lower. But that's how we calculate it. Gravity, of course, is equal to weight over the mass. That's the weight is really the pushing down of gravity on a mass, and that's how we calculate gravity. And of course, paleogravity has to be the same. We have to look at the weight over the mass, and so that's how he goes about uh, making his calculations, which are quite amazing. Again, stick around, folks. This evidence is pretty amazing. So again, gravity is equal to the weight over mass. Now, these are all the dinosaur models I believe that Stephen has. He's trying to hook up here. Hopefully, we can get him. He's still his internet isn't working so well, but he has these actual 3D dinosaurs. I suppose he's probably paying some good money for them because those don't look like just regular dinosaur models. So let's see if we can get him to us here, if he's connected with and can hear us, or we can hear him. It's really been more of a case of hearing him. Stephen, I am putting you back online here. Can we hear you? Say something.
Well, I can hear you.
Okay,
I
good.
don't
We can
know
hear
if
you.
can hear me now.
Okay,
Yes,
so I'm gonna,
yes, I can.
okay, I can. We can hear you. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna go back with the slides, all right, and have you start, and hopefully we'll hear you. If I find that your audio's not coming through, then we'll maybe have to sort of punt again. So go ahead, start your talk.
My talk today asks the question, can we calculate paleogravity? Before we ask that question, perhaps I should explain what paleogravity is. We all know what gravity is. It is that force which holds us down to the ground. Paleo just means ancient. So paleogravity is simply the strength of the Earth's surface gravity in the past. It is widely imagined that paleogravity has been the same for hundreds of millions of years. This raises an interesting question. Is there any scientific method to check this common assumption? At first, it might seem that we would need a time machine to measure paleogravity, but let's explore the possibility further. And then next slide, please. Thank you. Measuring surface gravity today is a simple scientific procedure. Only two measurements are required: weight and mass. We can measure the weight of a known mass and then use these values to calculate paleogravity. On Earth, astronauts weigh a certain amount. On the Moon, they weigh only 1/6 what they did on Earth, but their mass has stayed the same. Next slide, please. So we can therefore measure gravity with a simple weight-mass formula. If we had a time machine, we could send our astronauts back into the past to measure the weight, and this would enable us to calculate paleogravity if we could calculate the weight of any known mass that we know existed in the past. Next slide, please. A prehistoric animal could be used to calculate paleogravity using the weight mass. Let's consider how we might calculate the weight of an animal. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
It's coming. There's a delay.
Anderson and his team studied the bones of slight delay. Anderson and his team studied the bones of a rhino, calculate the weight of an animal based on the dimensions of its leg bones. This formula can predict the weight of land-based. You can actually see the line that this formula produces, and we can actually see the various square dots are actually the actual weight. With a scatter around gives a fairly good prediction of what the actual weight of the animal is. So we can say that we can calculate an animal's weight from just the dimensions of its leg bones. Next slide, please. So now let's consider how we could calculate the mass of an animal. The mass of an animal can be calculated by measuring the volume of a scale model and then multiplying that by the relative scale and density of the animal. And here we see a figure which is from a figure that Alexander produced way back in 1989, and he's just showing how he can use a model and actually put that in water to calculate the volume of that model, and then from that he can then calculate the actual weight of the animal. So paleontologists have produced accurate reconstructions of a large number of prehistoric animals from just their skeletons. And these reconstructions allow the mass of the same land-based animal to be calculated from its body volume. Next slide, please. Okay, using the weight from the bone strength method and the mass from the volume method. For the
next slide.
Next slide, yes, please. Giraffatitan. This animal, this dinosaur, has only recently been renamed and was known as Brachiosaurus for years. In the picture on the left, you can see me standing in front of the Berlin Giraffatitan. And you can see exactly how big this animal is. I think you can just about see me in the front there. So if I could actually walk underneath the, that's it, that's me, yes. So if I could actually walk underneath the animal, I think even if I reached up to the top, I wouldn't actually be able to reach the where its belly would have been. So that's it's fairly impressive size of animal. So the picture in the middle is from the Jurassic Park film. And this was the very first dinosaur that they saw was Giraffatitan. This is the famous scene where he actually pulls his sunglasses down and looks across to see a Giraffatitan coming out of the water. And below that picture, we see a number of scientific reconstructions, and these really are to get the body volume of the animal, therefore calculate the weight. Calculate the mass of the animal. And on the right are a number of models I've used for the to actually try and calculate the mass estimates again. At the top one is from a physical model that I've always used the actual volume of that particular model and then scale it up. And the bottom one is a computer model that I produce, and from that it's actually I can actually calculate the volume directly from that computer model. So next slide, please, I think. So here's the result results I got. So this paleogravity calculation indicated that gravity was 2 million years ago, and you can see the red dot there. That's it. Now remember that this is a surprising result because the common assumption G, so it should be right up the top there at the 1G, and my actual result is 0.54 G. So next slide, please. And the next dinosaur I looked at was Tyrannosaurus rex. There are at least a dozen skeletons or a dozen specimens of T-Rex, and 4 specimens were suitable for paleogravity calculations. The picture on the left-hand side shows me in front of a cast of the Carnegie T-Rex specimen. Now, the Carnegie T-Rex specimen was one of the very first T-Rex specimen that right in the early 1900s. So this is one of the first ones found. The middle picture shows a stand specimen, and the stand specimen is from, I think it's around about the 1980s. Shows the Stu and the Wankel T-Rex specimens, which are some more specimens. So could I have the next slide, please? That's it. So so these 4 specimens produce paleogravity estimates of 0.61 G, 0.64 G, 0.67 million years ago. And could I have the next slide, please? Or I decided to look at was Acrocanthosaurus. And although this dinosaur is about the same length as T-Rex, it is a lot less massive because its body is more. On the plan view on the bottom right, you can see there that it's actually quite a narrow type of animal, and that reduces the mass of the animal quite a bit. And I think also you can see it on face on views as well. Could I have the next slide, please? And so Acrocanthosaurus produced a paleogravity estimate of 0.54 G at around about 113 million years ago. Could I have the next slide, please? And around about 210 million years ago, there were a group of Coelophysis dinosaurs that became trapped in a floodplain. Now, until about the 1940s, this Coelophysis was only known from actually one specimen, and it's quite a poor specimen. But in about 1940, they actually found this whole graveyard of Coelophysis, and so we can see on the right hand side there's more mature ones and some smaller ones, and so we've got about 100 of those to be looking at. So it's actually become one of the best known dinosaurs from that time from around about 210 million years ago. And the one on the bottom is just a commercial model that of some of these specimens. So could I have the next slide, please? And so the 2 specimens of Coelophysis produced a paleogravity estimates of 0.42 G. Can I have the next slide? And one recent dinosaur discovery was the dino bird, Gigantoraptor. And this was actually in the noughties sometime, I think possibly around about 2003. So it's quite a recent discovery. And the picture on the left was taken at the Dinosaurs of China exhibition in the UK. And you can actually see it's from the size of the people in the background. You can actually see it's quite a large, gigantic animal. And the picture on the right is from the BBC Earth, just Gigantoraptor, and this. So you can actually see quite a bit reconstructions of those. So could I have the next slide, please? Okay. So Gigantoraptor gives a paleogravity estimate of 0.61 G at 80 million years ago. Next slide, please. And Coelophysis is one of the armored dinosaurs, are quite remarkable. On the picture on the left, we see a related species that was formed a lifelike dinosaur mommy. Dinosaurs seem to be so accurate, and so the that picture on the left is it's actually just a related species, but there are quite a few skin impressions of these types of animals with all the scales on their body, which form quite well. And the picture on the right is one of the dinosaur models that I used to actually try and calculate the mass, which seems a very good, very accurate reconstruction. Could I have the next slide, please? And so this one produced a paleogravity estimate of 0.69 G at 67 million years ago, same time as TRex. So it gave me a useful comparison between a bipedal and a quadrupedal animal. And as you see, if we allow for scatter, the round about a similar sort of range. So that's quite useful to actually compare the bipedal and the quadrupedal formula. So could we have the next slide, please? And another armored dinosaur was Europlosiphilus, and there are various reconstructions of this animal. We've got again the picture on the left-hand side. That was actual what I actually used for the calculating the mass of the animal, and you can see this is the skeleton is actually quite a good dinosaur skeletons, and I've actually compared various some reconstructions produced by various paleontologists as well to just to try and check that the mass estimate was as accurate as I could. So could I have the next slide, please? So the Europlosiphilus gives a paleogravity estimate of 0.65 G at around about 67 million years ago. have the next slide, please? And one well-known British dinosaur is in Oxford in the UK. And the British Museum also supplies scale models of Megalosaurus, which can be used to estimate mass. And on the bottom left-hand side, you can see me poking through, looking through its mouth. So that gives a reasonable estimate of how big this animal was. It was a fair old size. Could I have the next slide, please? Megalosaurus produces a paleogravity estimate of 0.51 g at around about 167 million years ago. Could I have the next slide, please? And I've been doing dinosaurs up until now, but I decided I'd start having a look at some of the mammals, because obviously the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. So if I had to actually want to fill in that gap from 65 up to the present day, I've got to start to look at some mammals. So I've just looked at this one mammal, which is Paraceratherium, which is one of the it's actually one of the giant rhinoceros. It is a giant rhinoceros. And the one on the left at the top there is from the 1936. It was reconstructed at that time as a quite heavily reconstructed animal. But if we look at towards the right, the modern day reconstructions tend to reconstruct it as a slightly less massive animal. It also has, and this giant rhinoceros has also been known by at least 3 different names, depending on whether it was discovered by British, Russian, or American paleontologists. On the bottom left-hand side, we can see that Donald Prothero has reconstructed the animal with large ears. That's the one to the right of where the arrow is now, the Rhinoceros giants. That's from the cover of Donald Prothero's book, and we can see his ears and some sort of proboscis. But they shouldn't affect the mass too much. And then the model on the right-hand side is what I actually use to help try and calculate the mass. So could we have the next slide? And so Paraceratherium produced paleogravity estimates of 0.73 at around about 29 million years ago. So could we have the next slide? And these are all the estimates. All paleogravity was much the same as today's gravity. However, the weight mass method indicates that paleogravity has been slowly increasing towards our present day surface gravity. From these initial increase rather than a linear one, and we can see there, if we try and put a straight line through those points, it wouldn't actually fit. So we need some sort of exponential increase to actually get it up to. And I've written up all these paleogravity calculations in a series of articles, and you can find them all on my website at for more, yes, where the arrow is, at Dinox. That's it, dinox.org. And if you put /pub, it should take you directly to all those articles. Well, thank you for listening, and I hope all the sound has actually worked okay now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, yeah, actually it went pretty well. We had a
Good.
little bit of cutting out, but it's really great to have you do it instead of me because I was going to start plowing through these. But
Okay.
one question, actually, we have a question. So if you have questions for Stephen, then you can send them our way. I can display them here. So Brian Kerr has a question. Can the same thing be done with small animals from way back as well?
Yes, yeah. It shouldn't matter how big the animal is.
But they'd
Um,
have to have, do they have to have a femur?
yeah, that's the requirement. They have to have a femur so that we can actually calculate the weight. Because obviously the animal's weight is actually the femur is holding up the animal's weight, so it's that we have to use to actually calculate what this force might have been in the past. But it shouldn't matter. It just so happens really that there's more scientific research done on large animals than there is on small animals, and I think it's just like everybody that people are keener to actually do their look at a large animal because that's where the fascination is. So it's actually easier to get all the data for large animals rather than the small ones. But yes, it should. It won't affect the results at all. You know, we should.
So do you think would it be interesting then to go back even further and even try smaller, I mean, animals than where you've gone, or is it just not enough data for that?
Uh, well, I've gone back 210 million years.
Oh, come
Um,
on. We're your audience is wanting more. I mean, gee whiz. That's what the
uh,
audience is here is to push you further. No, I'm kidding. Come on, yeah. But this
and
is not sport.
before then, dinosaurs were just evolving then. So that first animal was quite a small dinosaur
Right.
because it was evolving. But before that time, the animals didn't actually have an upright posture. They were more splayed, a bit like an amphibian, or well, they were obviously amphibians. So they had this splayed posture. So I can't actually use this technique on amphibians to actually calculate
Right.
the weight of it, just because of the posture. The posture is wrong. So
Right. I mean, when they're floating in water, it's tough. But
yeah.
in
Mm.
reality, though, in reality, it seems to me that you could really develop different techniques for different types of animals. I mean, right now, it's the femur because femurs were used, right? But one of the things about the idea of paleogravity, at least in my mind, is that this is just one technique, one person looking at one idea, and there are quite a few other ideas out there. So it would seem to me that maybe instead of looking at the femur, some other idea could even be done as to the sizes of even the largest underwater, even if it's just a comparison. The problem, well, I guess you'd have to come up with in each of those ways some way to calculate from fossils the mass of those um, uh, animals, correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. You're right. And, there are other ways. Blood pressure is one way we can look at it. Obviously, there's been various calculations done that the largest sauropod dinosaurs, their heads were so high that the blood pressure would actually
Right.
burst their hearts, and obviously the reason for this pressure would be reduced actually on their hearts. So there's quite a bit of um, interesting calculations to
Right.
do there, I think. think,
right.
to go through. And then there's also evidence of various sauropods don't seem to be strong enough to actually support their heads. And again, there's another interesting area there of actually how we could calculate the gravity from the size of the neck. Neck ligaments don't actually fossilize, so we're actually inferring how big the ligaments would be from just bones. So results might be.
Okay, so there's physiological calculations that can be done. I know I've heard other people mention about the heart size and blood pumping and pressure because that is a problem as well. Here's another question from Dr. Lucas. He was asking, was C14 decay used to determine the age of the bones for the dinosaurs?
No, it wasn't carbon-14. Carbon-14 only goes up back to about, I think, 20,000 years, I think. I might be wrong there, but in fact, it doesn't go back far enough.
Right.
So the ages we use when we're talking of in terms of these tens of millions of years, the type of things they use is radioactive decay. So that they'll actually look at various isotopes within the rocks, and from measuring that, they can actually get a reasonable estimate of what age that rock is. There's actually various isotopes that they can use because obviously they decay at a different rate. So there's overlapping ages that they can actually use. So no, it wasn't carbon-14, but it's a similar idea, but carbon-14 doesn't go back far enough in time.
Okay, here's another common question. It's from Brian Kerr. I like the Electric Universes EU as well. They take the approach that the matter of the planet got more massive rather than the planet getting more matter. Now, that maybe you can make a comment on that because we're talking about obviously mass, matter, volume, weight. What you've done be able to make a because there obviously there are some people who are uncomfortable with the idea that the Earth has gained mass. Just like there are people who were uncomfortable in the early 1960s. Well, in the early 1960s, the poor geologists. I was sort of laughing after your talk last week, thinking about those poor geologists who were thinking the older generation, going, "Oh my gosh, people are trying to tell us that continents are moving." I don't know if I can accept that. Then someone else comes along and says, oh, not only they're not really moving, the whole Earth's expanding and maybe
Yes.
gaining mass. I mean, so they were like pulling their hair out. So they went for the, how do you say, the lesser of two evils, I guess you could say. But
That's right. Yes.
yeah, in this, I think there are some people, even in the dissident world, who do not like the idea that the Earth would be gaining mass. But that I think that you can sort of glean from Brian Kerr's comment that maybe people in the electric universe are looking at, well, the volume of the Earth has increased, but the mass hasn't. What would you say about that? I know I have my own opinion, but I have read a lot of stuff. But what does this a study of paleogravity tell us? Is it actually the actual mass of the Earth increasing? Whether the volume is increasing proportionally or not, that's a different question. But is the mass, the amount of stuff that the Earth is made of, increasing according to your work?
Well, I think the key point of these results is that I'm only measuring the paleogravity of the Earth here. And so this is a completely independent method, if you like, of whether you want to look at the electric universe or whether you look at the expanding Earth. but having said that, because it's completely independent, if we actually plot the results of paleogravity, and if we compare that the results which James Maxlow has got from his expanding Earth model,
Right.
when he looks at what paleogravity would be on with an increasing mass of Earth expansion, his results are virtually identical to the results I'm getting here from a completely different, from a completely different set of data.
Wow, that's pretty shocking.
Yeah, so I mean,
In a
from
good
that,
way.
yes, yeah. So from that, I infer that the expanding Earth model with increasing mass is the most likely model that is true, I think.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think because the other alternatives, you have to look just logically. What are the other alternatives? Well, the other alternative is that gravity itself is changing, and there
Yes,
are some.
yes.
I think there are some people who do purport that. I know that Dr. Lucas, who asked one of the questions, and he's talked about it. Talks about gravity decaying. That's in his model. Now, I'm not sure if that really goes along with the idea that, in fact, the mass isn't increasing, but gravity is decreasing. But regardless, what I think what you're saying and what I understand as well is that the mass increase, if you look at all the different, even the models in the universe, all the different possibilities logically, I think the idea of mass increase seems to be a Occam's razor choice, in my opinion. It seems to make the most logical sense because if all of a sudden you have gravity and it's changing,
Yes, yes.
that is a real, how do you say, that's a real hard pill to swallow because that means physics is really way beyond than a force of gravity being sort of the same. But but again, those are obviously they're all possibility. Now, you were saying that one of the things that was interesting to me was that when we were talking with, when I was talking numerous times, I got to meet James Maxlow. One of the things he contacted, well, I talked with him about probably over 10 years ago, but he had mentioned he wanted really people in our organization to try to give some idea of what could cause mass increase. But he was so convinced. I don't want to talk about that today because that's a whole nother idea. I mean, I think that could be an interesting talk in itself, is just what kinds of mechanisms would be possible for the mass increase. But I was more fascinated by what in the heck was he seeing that in geology, because he wasn't looking at femur bone size, even though even Carrie mentioned you as sort of another data point. Samuel Warren Carey, one of the great geologists of our generations. He obviously, James Maxwell had some idea that, okay, I'm seeing geological evidence that mass has increased. Do you know? I can't remember off the top of my head what that explanation was. Do you remember what he had mentioned specifically about that?
I think if we go right back to the 1960s, they were obviously seeing geological evidence that the Earth had increased in diameter, and one of the very early ideas was that in some way all the material in the Earth had just increased in volume while
Right.
keeping the same mass.
Right, like something nuclear reaction or something going inside, and it's nothing
Yes.
else is being added, but it's like, okay, now it's going nuclear, now it's starting to create gases. Gas, of course, in more space, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. So, okay, so that was in the 1960s. Continue.
So 1960s, and of course when you run the calculation on that, because the mass of the Earth is the same, if we reduce that volume down to half the diameter, then of course the force of gravity will increase, and it'll actually go up by about 4 times. So they had the very real problem there, that they were saying that gravity must be 4 times, but then even life today would struggle in 4 times the current force of gravity.
Right. Right.
So in a way, it was gravity that sort of forced everybody to think that it can't possibly be that we've got the constant mass model, because animals couldn't exist in 4 times gravity. So
Okay. So do you think so? Okay, I'm not understanding one part. I apologize. So you're in the 1960s when the senior members of the geological, world community were struggling. Well, is it is it plate tectonics or would it be expansion tectonics? Are you saying gravity played a role in that and where the community turned?
Well, in the 1960s, nobody had actually thought of that yet, and I think it must have been about the 1980s, sometime like that, that people started to realise, well, hang on a minute, it can't be that, because the force of gravity must have been too much, and that actually came about. Carey actually held an expanding Earth, the first expanding Earth conference, and that actually came up in the first expanding Earth conference. So I think at that time that must have I think even before then, Carey was thinking that the constant Earth model was the one to go for. But obviously, when they had this conference and it was pointed out, well, that can't be true, then the only model left was the expanding mass model.
So you're saying Carey didn't come into the expansion tectonics, really put his feet into that side of the argument until in the 80s?
No,
I
no,
mean,
no,
he.
no,
Okay, I'm
no,
sorry.
no. He was arguing about it. Well, he was presenting this idea right back in 1956 was the first
Oh,
time.
sure.
So he presented the expanding Earth model, but he didn't realize that the constant mass model was just couldn't happen.
Okay, I see.
At that time. So it, I think it was around about 1981, I think it was, that it became evident that that the constant mass model wasn't correct.
Right.
I mean, you might well think that all these things appear to everybody instantaneously, all these ideas
Yeah, of
about
course.
everything, but in fact it takes decades for these ideas
Sure.
to sort of mull through, and then various
Sure.
people say other things, and they say, oh well, what about this, and then eventually these ideas congeal into what we've got today, which is basically that all the geological evidence shows that the Earth has expanded, and we know that it must have expanded from adding mass to the Earth.
Well, I think it
So,
can be, but I think one of the things is though, and it may be true, and this is talking about more specifics, but in my mind, and because I've been reading about this myself since 2008 and reading all the books, everything I could, it can't. In some sense, the way I look at it is the mass increases, but I think chemically, there's also things that can happen. So I'm personally in my own mind where I sit, I think that it's mass increase, but I think the exponential part isn't only mass increase. I don't think mass increase is necessarily exponential right now. It could be that simply because I think one of the reasons I think that Stephen, is because of the crack up of the. I mean, if you look at the way the Earth's expanded, yeah, it's getting to exponential. But there seems to be maybe other things maybe also happening at the same time because all of a sudden you had the crack up of the continents and you have water pouring through that. According to other people, methane and oil and water are being are produced inside the Earth, and that's why we have oil at 20,000 feet and water at 25,000 feet now that they're finding. Um, it could be the case that the actual expansion is going a little bit more is because there's not only Earth, I mean mass increase, but perhaps some kind of nuclear or things going on that is also now increasing the volume as well. Is that something? You see what I mean? So I'm sort of in my own mind think that's still a possibility. Okay, but that's just we neither one of us going to have any answer for that. But here's
No,
Cornelius
no.
Vehe. Could the Earth not just be? Is a question on the screen. Could the Earth not just be expanding and the continents be split up just by accumulation of matter from comet and meteorite materials, etc.?
Yeah, well, that was actually the explanation I gave in my book, Dinosaurs on the Expanding Earth. So I actually said that it could possibly just be material from outer space, and when I looked at it, the material at the moment is actually not enough.
Right.
To actually account for all that mass increase. So I postulated that possibly the material might have been greater in the past, and I was thinking perhaps in the ice ages we could imagine the Earth and the Sun system entering a cosmic cloud of dust. This could decrease the amount of sunlight that was getting through, causing an ice age. And at that point, there'd be a lot more of cosmic dust actually coming down onto the Earth, and that would increase the size of the Earth. Now the big problem with this idea is that all the Earth expansion, all the geologists actually see Earth expansion coming from the interior of the Earth.
Yes, absolutely.
So the problem is, how can we account for that material coming from the outside of the Earth to the inside? And so the idea I presented was down into the subduction zones, and could we imagine subduction zones as being isolated areas where the cosmic material, because it was slightly going down into the interior of the Earth over millions of years. So that was the idea I presented, and certainly are that keen on that. James Maxlow certainly does like that idea. That would be possible. So you know, that's certainly
Yeah, I think one of
something.
the problems is though too. I think one of the other problems too with the idea even of subduction, Stephen, is that look at Antarctica. That's one of the biggest problems with plate tectonics. One of the arguments when people are arguing this, expansion tectonics. Well, just take a look at Antarctica. You've got a real problem with our Antarctica. There's no subduction going on in our Antarctica. You have only expansion around it. So how is it supposed to be that the Earth is going to stay, the same radius? That's and so one of the things that I know, and so I can't forget which book, it may have been Carey's book, but the amount of subduction needed to keep the Earth the same radius is, and that's why they envision subduction. They
Mm,
can
mm.
they can push it to the limit, and maybe if you exaggerate a lot, you can get 30% of the subduction you need to keep the radius the same. But no one ever talks about that, right? So the whole idea of the subduction, I think that's one of the things that does make sense. The other thing that to me that doesn't make sense about it being accretion, which I think is what the official word is for gathering mass on the Earth, for accretion, is the idea that you really like you were saying. Well, what we are seeing increasing is the floor of the ocean, the materials coming from within. So
That's
at least
it,
what you
yes.
were trying
Yeah.
to do as well, subduction takes that in. Well, James Maxwell is going to say, wait a minute, you don't have enough subduction at all, even to keep the Earth's radius the same, let
Yeah.
alone, and the other thing is, yeah, okay, your Earth has more, surface area, therefore it's going to get more, mass. But I think pretty much those who have subscribed or looked into this seriously for many years, I think the general consensus in expansion tectonics is that probably that there's something going on where atoms become bigger atoms in the middle of suns. Why can't that happen in a core of the Earth? If the core of the Earth looks the same as the core of a sun, then why isn't it the case that it can't be taking raw materials at the subatomic level, making more mass? So let's see if we have some. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think John Eichler's actually the one who's come up with one of the most popular ideas at the moment, which is just the material from the sun is actually streaming out,
Right.
and it's being captured by our magnetic field, and I mean, he was on last week talking about it, and obviously these protons actually come down and they can actually flow into the interior of the Earth just because they're so small. And certainly James Maxlow has sort of signed on with that idea. And
Yeah, actually, we do too. We have our books coming out, and I
Mm.
made a graphic with that same idea.
Right.
And
Yes.
so it's actually got in our book. I made a diagram of exactly that process. I think that was sort of postulated by a lot of people separately. And one of those things, like even with the Earth expansion, you have a lot of people isolated come up with that kind of
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I lean toward that idea as well. Our model sort of leans toward that idea as well. Let's see. Let's see if I can find forces of. Okay, here we go. Here's another one. Cornelius says, "Why could the ocean simply not put pressure on Earth's crust that forces material out of the core of the oceans increases in size?" That's probably more of a James Maxwell question.
Probably.
Unless you can answer that.
No, I don't think I can. Why should the ocean not put pressure on the Earth's crust? Yeah.
Yeah. I think what I can say to that, and from what I've read, one of the biggest problems with subduction, just subduction in itself, let alone pressure from the water, is that the idea that the crust, the floor could actually subduct under the pressures that it has, seems somewhat silly to some people who are more on the geological side. They're looking at the density of rock, the way rock works, the ability to subduct. And I think one of the arguments I've heard for not subducting, which is sort of related, is that it's just the mass of rock, the forces involved, that it just couldn't happen. So I'm just probably going to take a guess that an answer could be is that the pressure from the ocean is simply not enough pressure with the gravitational pressure to be, force material out. The other question would be too is why would it force material out at a specific, that specific line? I mean, otherwise, yeah, you get hot spots now and then, but I think that's an interesting, it's an interesting question. All right, let's see if we.
I mean, last week as well, Dr. Khan, he was actually he'd actually produced a calculation in the book of actually trying to calculate could material be subducted into the ocean floor. And of course, the result he came up with that no, it couldn't.
Right.
It actually needs some mechanism where the material is denser to actually force itself through
Yes.
into the ocean floor.
Yeah.
So and I think a lot of people have made that point that how can we imagine this material, this lighter material of the ocean floor, actually forcing itself into the denser material of the mantle?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, exactly. That's the same arguments I've heard as well. I think again, listening to all the probable and possible arguments, you sort of start piecing together what seems to be sort of a consensus in expansion tectonics, at least amongst people who are really serious about it and look at it.
Yes.
I think you know simultaneous people who I admire coming up with very similar ideas. I think also sort of can sway what we think about it. But I think this opens up one of the ideas, and that is, I mean, one of the main things of what you're doing in general, why we're even here and what we're talking about is paleogravity. I mean, paleogravity really is something that, in my opinion, should be area of study. You could have hundreds of people around the world in paleontology looking at examples of mass increase, or not mass increase, looking for examples. Oh boy, that's too far in front. But looking for the idea that gravity was less. Can you mention? Was it you in your book who mentioned the sand dune height? That's a totally different idea of the height of sand dunes, and their relationship to the gravitational force. Was that in your first book, or was that in somebody else's book?
Yes, I think that was in one of the later editions.
Okay.
But
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because we talked about here is femurs, right? Today we talked about
yeah,
dinosaurs
yes,
and
but
animals' femurs.
the basic idea.
Yeah, go ahead. We have a delay again. Sorry.
The basic idea is if you imagine building a sand dune, and the sand dune will not floor. So we just as we put more sand on, it will fall down until eventually it stops. So that's called that angle depending on the strength of gravity.
Okay.
So some scientists over in America, you're part of the woods, and I'm afraid I can't remember the other scientist, but basically they looked at ancient sand dunes to try and see if the angle of repose actually varied over time.
Why would they?
And they actually
I have a
found
question
it
about
did.
that. I have a
So in
question
the
about that,
past,
Stephen.
the
I have a question about that. Why were they doing that? I mean,
yes,
it's interest. Why would they be looking for sand dune heights being different? I mean, I would understand that if you were you were into paleogravity, but what was their motivation for doing that in the first place?
I think it came from the other direction. I think they'd noticed that the angle of repose actually varied with time, so they were actually looking for some sort of explanation of why it might actually vary. So that's I think one of them was a geologist and one was a physicist, and so they'd actually come together and to try and work out, well, could it be the strength of gravity that was changing? And from that, they gave a variation in the strength of gravity. And when I found out about it, I contacted Dr. Mann at that time, and we agreed that the strength of gravity that we were calculating was round about the same using our different methods.
Holy cow! Did they write a paper on that?
They've written a paper on that. I probably got. I must have that. I think somewhere on my. I've got a list of papers on my website. I must have that somewhere. It was probably in the 1990s. Probably that was written. I've more or less lost touch with Dr. Mann now, so that I don't really know what happened. If anyone took that any further or not. But yes, it was certainly an interesting result, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that goes to show you there's quite a lot of different directions you can
Yes.
take in paleogravity. That paleogravity in itself, there's just, I mean, in my guess, there's a lot of evidence probably out there. And it's really remarkable to me that even in the small amount of evidence that's been looked at by a very small amount of people, that things are lining up. What's I think shocking to me is that, oh, well, gravity was about half about 170 years ago, 170 million years ago. And, who says that? You said it. James Maxwell said it. Maybe these guys with the sand dunes are seeing the same kind of thing. What other things are out there? And why aren't we out in geology getting degrees in paleogravity?
Yep. Yeah, it's just because everybody believes that gravity has never varied. And it comes back to this idea, really, that the Earth was created at its present size, thousands of millions of years ago. It was supposed to be the size it is now, and it's just that everybody's got this concept in their mind, and they can't quite see past that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, well, physics doesn't tell us that there could be mass increase, especially if it's subatomic. People aren't, and so physicists aren't telling us this, and they go through their mind of all the obstacles that they're going to put in the way of doing, looking into that. There's just a lot of pressure. But I think eventually the pressure is going to become more and more that something's going to, hopefully crack, and just like the Earth expansion.
Excuse the pun.
Yeah.
It's going to crack.
Okay. Do we have any more questions for Stephen about paleogravity? This is Stephen Hurrell. He has written a book recently called, let's get back to, here we go. He's written a book called The Hidden History of Earth Expansion. If you haven't read that, and if you haven't read his other book, which is, oh, by the way, did you get any reviews of your new book on Amazon? Hint, 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 hint.
Oh, yes, I did. Yes, it was a very nice review from somebody called David D. Hisler.
Yeah, I decided, come on, folks, somebody's got to put it down. But I always try to write. I don't even know where I was. I was standing with my phone somewhere, and somebody needed to talk with me, and I said, "Wait, hold on, I've got this important thing I've got to finish here."
Yes,
so the
lovely.
world just works in a different way. Hopefully, we'll get some other people. So if you have read the book or you haven't got it, get the book. It's truly fascinating. It's a great introduction to Earth expansion, or what a lot of us call expansion tectonics. And the dinosaur book that you have that Stephen wrote before is also a really great book. I think it's a little easier to read in the sense of, it's more colloquial, and this book is, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, see the history of it, because this history has gone on for quite a while, right? I mean, this is not something that happened overnight. This has
Oh,
happened over I guess over 100 years, right? I mean,
yeah, easily. I mean, the first one I have come across was actually a over in Britain. The Yorkshire Geological Society actually had a meeting about it in 1859.
oh my
So,
goodness,
and the two of them were actually presenting the concept that the Earth might have expanded at that time. So
whoa,
this is really ancient stuff. And then so uh, it was interesting that a lot of the people, a lot of the early people, didn't actually realize that somebody else was actually having the similar idea.
yeah,
So the next idea was actually in actually over in France, I think, and in just before the turn of the century, uh, and then going up to there's then in Germany there's a few more, and then we have in 1933, Hilgenberg wrote his famous book about Earth expansion,
right,
uh, and at that time nobody knew about anybody else. Oh, and there was some more guys over in Russia as well. I should mention there was some guys over in Russia, uh, but nobody even believed that at that time that continental drift was real.
right,
Uh, so it sort of drifted then right up to the 1950s, really, where Carey started getting involved, and again he rediscovered the idea of Earth expansion, and then when he went through and actually started looking at through the libraries, he actually discovered that there's quite a few other people that had actually come up with this idea before. So he realized then that actually he wasn't the first to discover it, but all these other people had
sure, sure,
had
sure.
done quite a bit as well.
So,
But it was Carey that did most of the work, and he carried it forward, and it looks like to me as though he more or less had to wait until he'd retired until he could go back to it. But once he'd retired, he actually took on this mantle of actually trying to promote Earth expansion.
yeah, at that time he had no
So
money or reputation to worry about, right?
well, he had his yes, he had his pension all locked up, so he could do what he wanted then. And
Yeah,
I mean, it's quite interesting. Some of the guys who I've got in this book, um, that they actually mention that that they've got up to retirement age, so they now have a stipend of their pension to keep
right.
them going, and they can spend all the time they want on actually looking at what they're interested in, which is obviously Earth expansion.
Yeah, which is
So
sad,
actually,
really.
they
Yeah,
find themselves in the same boat of actually pushing.
yeah,
It
yeah. Well,
is,
that.
it is. Yeah.
I mean, it's sad in life where you have
Why
such an
can't
amazing
we
topic.
allow
Yeah,
people to
yeah,
actually?
yep.
Yes.
Oh, why don't you tell us a little bit about? Here, we're coming up on about 30 minutes left. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your future work? Obviously, you've just got done writing a book. Also, you are giving this talk, right? Maybe two things. One, explain. You're supposedly giving this talk somewhere, correct, in the future, and then also what your current work is, which is I think with flying dinosaurs. Maybe you tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean that talk I gave today. I'd actually arranged to go over to the Polish Geological Congress to give that talk over there. And obviously over in Poland, there's quite a few geologists over there who are interested in the concept of Earth expansion. So it would have fitted in perfectly there to actually go over. And obviously, unfortunately, that was in June, and coronavirus sort of reared its head. And of course, the conference now has been it's been certainly abandoned for June. And they might possibly have it next year. So you know, sort of events overtook us, I think, with actually presenting that at a geological congress. I have presented it also at my local Liverpool Geological Society. I presented it there, and obviously everybody there was quite interested in the concept as well. So
They were interested. Come on, you think that the geological community? You know, one of the things I found is I went on a talk in the late 1990s with my mentor, Dr. Carrazzani, Dr. Ricardo Carrazzani, a physicist from
yes,
Argentina, and we went to give a talk. He went to give a talk. I gave a little bit, but he was the main speaker, and he was talking about how special relativity is incorrect. What the problems he found were, he corrected the equations, and what was resulting was really more Newtonian universe. But it was funny because at that point we were talking about the Big Bang, and this was in the again late 1990s, and the astronomy club there, which actually Einstein himself actually went there a couple of times. It was on Long Island in New York. They had no problems. In fact, they would say, "Oh, you know, we've explained away redshift everywhere except between galaxies, and yeah, the Big Bang's a big bust." Now you're talking to an astronomy group who are extremely, how do you say, extremely serious about what they do. They make their own telescopes and they do all those kinds of things, but they seem to be way ahead of the actual astronomers with all the big bucks and big telescopes. Is that the same thing that you find in the geological world?
I don't know. I think geologists that they tend to actually report on what they actually see. So if you go out and see a mountain, you'll actually report on all the slump structures in the mountain. So quite a few of them have a different way of looking at science. It's really a different type of science from what you might see in physics, where in physics, I think it's a lot of things are theory driven. So you start from the idea of a theory, and then you try and actually look for evidence for that theory. But from the point of view of geologists, I think a lot of it is you're actually doing it the other way around. You're actually coming up and actually trying to investigate what is actually there.
Yeah, but if that's the case, then why aren't geologists embracing expansion tectonics, which, in my opinion, has a way more? I mean, how do you say? It's a Occam's razor. It way simplifies the whole plate tectonics movement. I mean, it's ridiculous the way the plate tectonics works, right? I mean, if you've seen the way they try to graph that stuff, it's ridiculous. There's all these problems of having, Australia, Eastern Australia has the same rocks as what's in, North America. How does that happen according to plate tectonics? So you have all those things. Maybe it's because it's more theoretical, but what I'm asking you is you went to speak on something that was about the gravity being different. You must have mentioned expansion tectonics, but why aren't you then, if that's the case that geologists are open to what they see and what you can point to, why aren't you giving talks at Cambridge and Oxford?
I think probably because there's more money up at Cambridge and Oxford than there is round at our local geological society. So I mean, what one thing that one quite senior geologist said to me is that it's actually a lot of these things are all politics. So if you've created your department, your geological department, you have to be quite a good politician to actually get all the funds in and actually get all the money flowing in.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, you don't the people who are actually in charge don't really want something coming through and rocking the boat, if you will, and actually making people think, oh, well, perhaps I better not be putting money into that department because, it seems as though the science isn't as solid as it should be. So,
Yeah,
it's
but so is it? It's okay. So it's the politics, but um, so that's what's keeping what you're saying. So in the smaller groups, they don't have those political concerns. Do
no,
they see
no.
them? Do they feel a little like, well, oh, we had Stephen Hurrell talking about expansion tectonics, which is flies in the face a lot. Really flies in the face of plate tectonics. They don't see that doesn't seem to bother them then at all. Aren't there people there with geological degrees? Look, I know one of the greatest scientists, in my opinion, of our generation who works on something. I'm not going to name him, but he's gave us a contribution, in my opinion, that's put his name down in history. He's a geologist, and he said to me, despite all I know that expansion tectonics has more, but he has clients that rely on him to do work, and he has to talk about subduction, and he uses that to help, and he gets money to go to places that say, don't build a building here, build a building here. And so, yeah, the politics of those. So these geological clubs, don't they have geologists with degrees there, or are they just more amateur geologists?
No, most of them are geologists. Yes, I mean we have the whole range of geologists. So I mean the idea is that quite a few of them, the ones with degrees can actually sort of lead the walks around and have a look at
Right,
various
right, right.
places.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But
Geology is very interesting. Yeah.
but 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 I think you get the whole range of as in anywhere. We get the whole range. I mean, after the talk, I had a few people come up to me and say, "Oh, that was a brilliant talk. What's happening now?" Sort of thing. Why isn't virtually the same thing you've said? Why isn't that
Right.
being promoted? And then we've gone right back to the other extreme that people are saying, "Oh no, I can't really believe that because the main problem is what is the mechanism for actually mass increase." I
Right.
think that's the main reason that people are actually sort of saying, "Well, I can't really believe this because I just don't quite get how the Earth can be expanding, even though there's all this evidence that it is." We do get the whole you get the whole range of sort of thought about it.
Yeah, when people ask me what I tell them, especially when they say, "Well, what makes the Earth expand?" I said, "Look, we have some very good ideas. In fact, there's starting to become more of a consensus of what people really think's happening." But I tell them, I said, "Look, the first thing you need to do is just look at the evidence for it. Look at the evidence not only for expansion, but things like your talk here on the evidence for mass increase, because you're not the only one saying mass increase. You've got the sand dunes. You've got James Maxwell, who came to me. He didn't say, Dave, the mass is increasing because of dinosaurs. He saw it on one of his walks on the plains of Australia, I guess. But so what I tell people, I said, look, there comes a point in science where I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't. There comes a point in science where I think comes a point in science where you have to say, okay, the evidence is all pointing toward mass has increased, so let's stop arguing about it and try to solve it. I mean, that's one of the things about science. We get so many things that are indirect, and how many of the greatest discoveries that we have come from those kinds of indirect, those correlations. Well, oh, it's all pointing to this. We can say we don't have a mechanism. Does it mean it's not happening? No. Look at the data. It happened. It's not, the problem isn't there is no mechanism. The problem
No,
is we
no.
can't explain it.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And so I tell people, I said, look, we have good ideas. You want to hear them? Here are some of the ideas. And you can give them all of them, accretion and all that, and give them, the idea of the subatomic particles. Other people say, gravity's changing. Whatever it is, do we have a consensus in mainstream science? Absolutely not. They're not even believing the expansion tectonics. But so I always tell people, look for yourself, read it, make up your own mind. And when you come to it, the way I look at it now, it isn't a question of mass increase. It's a question of us coming to a consensus of how that's really happening. So, let's see. Okay, there was a second part of the question
certainly
to
that's
you.
the next stage.
Yeah, but there's another part of the question before. Let's see, I've got 20 minutes or so, 22. Tell us what since
Yes.
this is one of two talks with you, tell us what you are currently doing, because I think it's really, really fascinating. What's your current study? It has to do with, first, I'll give people a hint. He's only worked with dinosaurs that walk on the ground. Hint, hint.
Yes, at the moment I'm looking at some of the large pterosaurs, and I think, as most people know, these have actually produced massive animals, up to 10 meters wingspan, around about a quarter of a ton in weight. They were round about the size of a small plane. So obviously
Wow.
the problem has been for ages that these animals are just too big to fly. And actually, if we look at look at the calculations of how they could fly, the calculations say they couldn't. And actually, this has been a problem right through from the 1970s, when some of these largest of these pterosaurs began to be found. The engineers came through and they said, well, they can't possibly have been that large because they simply couldn't fly. And of course, the paleontologist said, well, that's what we found. We found that there were these animals, and they've got all the things that we need for them to fly. So they must have been able to fly, despite what your calculations show. And in fact, so that's it. That's exactly were they too big to fly, and how did they manage it? So obviously, one of the one suggestion that has actually been around for decades is that if gravity was less, then the animals could grow bigger, and so they could actually fly in this reduced gravity. And there's one chap, Colin Pedicek, who is actually he's actually quite well known in actually calculating all the aerodynamics of bird flight, and he's written quite a few books about it.
Really?
And he's actually been saying for decades, well, one possibility might be that gravity was less. He's actually written a computer program that calculates all the
Wow.
all the aerodynamics for bird flight, and in that program he actually allowed the gravity to be varied, so we can actually just input into that program, which we can just input a variable gravity into that program, and see how well these animals could fly. So that's what I'm currently looking at the moment, and
Do you
hopefully
have any preliminary results? Anything pointing yet, or just too soon to make any conclusions?
Yes, I've got far enough to say that the largest of the pterosaurs, these ones with 10 meters wingspan, up to nearly quarter of a ton. If we actually plug all those those figures into the program, we can see that they'd fly with about as much athletic ability as the present day large flyers like a
Wow.
swan or something like that.
Wow.
So it all points together that again that gravity was round about the same size, and these animals just grew to the maximum size they could.
Right. Now, here's a question here that's from Cornelius again. If gravity was less then the air would be thinner, also hindering flight. Is that something also that's been looked into, or you're also do these people take into consideration?
Oh, well, actually, I looked at that. I actually looked at it from the other point of view because of course, one other suggestion was that it wasn't that the air was thinner. The suggestion was that the atmosphere was thicker, and therefore that allowed the animals to fly easier because it gives them
I got you.
greater lift. So I've actually tried that with the program, and it actually makes a slight bit of difference into how much lift that they get, but it actually doesn't make that much difference. It doesn't make enough difference to enable larger animals to fly, with greater gravity, or even with reduced gravity. Sorry, greater air pressure or reduced air pressure.
Okay, so what you're saying is that it does affect, but it's very small and really can't be the explanation by itself.
Yeah, it's a very change in gravitation in atmospheric pressure doesn't really change the results that much. Yes,
because if it did, that's really one of the that's the main argument I've always heard, even since I was younger, because I also had that kind of thinking, like, my goodness, because one of the things that's really interesting is to watch movies of animated movies that have dragons in them. Right, they're basically dragons. I think really did come from dinosaur bones, right? So my conjecture is the whole idea that human came with dragons, because people found these dinosaurs and they thought these dragons live somewhere. Well, if you think about it, when you watch those animations, there's no way these things could fly. You can as you've watched birds all your life, you sort of get this model in your head about what can fly and what can't. What you see is this body and these little wings, and you're thinking to yourself, I've seen planes, I've seen, it's just ludicrous, because you see them sort of going whoop, whoop, and the wings aren't just not big enough in my opinion. So the sort of common sense that we humans have about flight from just observation of planes, observations of birds, I always laugh at them. I look at them, I go, oh man, those are dinosaurs flying, and that ain't how it worked. So
if we look at the various birds that we can see today, small birds can easily take off, and as they get larger and larger, then large birds are, if you just look at the various range of sizes of birds, you can
Right.
actually see that.
Right.
And so the limit today is around about 16 kilograms, possibly something for an actual animal to fly in 1G.
Right. No, I mean, the other thing is too, we have, I think, somewhat closer to, well, you got flying reptiles as you have the, bats, right? And some of those bats are pretty big. So that's
Yes,
are
yeah.
bat, even though bats are mammals, are they more similar to what you're looking at with pterosaurs?
Yes, probably. I mean, that they have the leathery wing.
Right.
So I mean, we can see the same problem with the size of animals with large bats. I mean, they're called the flying foxes in Australia, aren't they? Which I
Right.
always think is a nicer name. But yeah, but I mean, their leathery wings very similar to what we might see with the pterosaurs. The I think the big difference with the pterosaurs in that drawing that you've got there, they're actually standing up on all four limbs, and
Right.
they actually have some fossils of a pterosaur landing, so they can actually tell that as it came and it landed with its rear feet first, and then it put its forelimbs down on the floor to steady itself, and then it walked around on all fours, more or less as we see in that drawing there. So
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 how would you find fossils of a bird in flight? Is it that do they have imprints of them, or I mean, that's bizarre. I'm not questioning it, but what is
but
how do you know you captured a fossil of something millions of years old that was in flight?
uh, it's just because it's when it was actually landing. So there aren't any prints behind it. So it must have landed somehow to actually
Uh-huh.
get there. So it
Right.
touched down, and they can actually see as it touched down with its rear feet. I think it actually touched down first and then hopped a little bit on its rear feet, touched down again, and then its front arms came down, and it stood up on all fours as it came down, and then once it had landed on the ground, it then walked away. So they have all that fossil footprint
Okay.
of that actual landing.
Wow.
So I mean, obviously we've got the evidence of the footprints and the arms at the front there, and I suppose what you're saying is that we are inferring the rest, aren't we? That
Sure. Sure.
it must have come in and it must have landed because we can't see any footprints behind it.
Yeah,
So
no, that makes sense. It
mm,
makes sense, and not only that, we do have birds and mammals that do, have similar, how do you say, form, and so we do know that those kinds of things will go on. All right,
mm,
we have
mm.
10 more minutes, and so my question to you in the flying reptiles. Is this going to be a talk of? It sounds like okay. Here we go. It sounds like Stephen Hurrell is putting together enough material that there would be a third book called Paleogravity.
Well, possibly. I, I, yeah, I mean, at the moment, I'm just working through all these various ideas, and I'm writing them out as I go along. So obviously, what I've been saying there about the large pterosaurs, I intend to write that all out, and I'll publish that just as a
Sort of
just
like a
as
white paper.
just as a PDF, so people can actually download that and they can comment on that if they wish.
Well, I tell you, the other question I have is we have obviously the CMPS is sponsors this. Again, the website for the two websites for the CMPS are these websites you can see below, Natural Philosophy and Science Woke. We do have this forum we have every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. till noon on Eastern Standard Time, 3 to 5 European time, and 7 to 9 a.m. on the west coast of the United States. But maybe, I've noticed, John Eichler's here. There's been other people. This could be a way for people interested in expansion tectonics, even maybe once a month, to sort of get together and talk. This is available to all members of the CMPS. I know I use it myself for the Dissident channel because just today we're going on pretty much about a 2-to-1 margin of people, again, who are subscribers to my Dissident Science YouTube channel. But the idea is it's available for this community, those people who are working outside of mainstream, who are what I say are doing serious work, have. So something for you, Stephen, to think about maybe, and John Eichler. Maybe you guys want to, we can, if that's the case, we'll give you how to log in and use this, and I'd help you announce it. But even if it's once a month, maybe we could have a forum on the expansion tectonics. So it is available, and as you can see, anybody in the world can join in. It works quite well.
Yeah, I mean, John could obviously give a talk, couldn't he, on his mechanism for?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think he has already given one, hasn't he? Didn't he
It may be the case.
give one
John,
at,
have you, John? He's probably away. Or John, are you there?
having internet problems like me?
No, I think he's okay. It may be, or well, it's not muted here on my side. Okay, I'll bring him back down. But anyways, yeah, I think he has, but it's been a while. I mean, our first talk on expansion tectonics was by Dennis McCarthy back in 2008. So I don't think we have this a lot. It's been more just sort of freestyle, free forum. We're trying to get people. So even if he had given that a while back, it still may be worth it. John, are you there? John Eichler. Usually, yeah, he's got a good connection usually and a good microphone. May have stepped away. But anyways, it is something for you guys to think about. And all right, we have 5 minutes left. I've been watching the comments. There's been discussions between people and themselves. I've been trying to pick out anything that I thought may be interesting as a question for our guest today, Stephen Hurrell. Again, his website is dinox.org. It's got 2 great books. You should check them both out. In fact, I did a video way back. I started out 3 years ago. I can't believe it. 3 years I've been doing my YouTube channel. And I had one of my, if you go to Dissident Science and then look up books, I think I had my 2 must-read books. And one of my must-read books were Dinosaurs and the Expanding Earth. So you should be very privileged that an esoteric, unknown person like myself has put you up on their to-read book. I mean, it's too bad I'm not somebody. Then it would maybe matter. But I would say to all my all to my subscribers out there, and I do have over 3,000. I want to thank everybody who subscribes to my channel. That definitely. It should be a must-read for anybody, and it's an easy way to get into expansion tectonics. James Maxwell's book, which I think is the greatest book in geology ever written, in my opinion, even better than Carey's, because he had the benefit of all that data and all those people. And he, as a geologist, literally took it as far as you possibly can. And that to me is the greatest geological book ever written. But it's a little technical maybe at first. So I would highly recommend you get Stephen Hurrell's book, Dinosaurs and Expanding Earth, and it'll get you into thinking, oh my gosh, maybe there is something to Earth expansion. So here's a comment. It says, thanks, David Stephen. Refreshing break from the norm we've bombarded with, which is more or moving particles and charges, moving charges in electric fields. And of course, if you read my dad and I book, there is nothing as charge, But anyways, that's a whole different story. But it is great, and it's great to give poor Franklin Hugh, who's every week here. Sometimes, most of the time we don't have speakers, and I absolutely invite anyone, including John Eichler, if you're listening, if you haven't talked to this group for a while, or want to put together a presentation, especially in the area of expansion tectonics, because you have people like Ian Cohen, who's not convinced yet. I'd like to even just have us talk sometime with him and say, hey, how is it coming now, Ian? I really enjoy Ian's comments during the Saturday morning chats here on the CMPS Saturday morning science chats. So it'd be interesting to get people there's a lot of people, Stephen, that don't know about expansion tectonics, really haven't thought about it. So I'm really hoping this will. I know that I've done a lot of work myself. When we had our in-person conferences, I've given numerous talks on the subject. And I have actually heard people like saying, oh, Dave, it's great that you bring this up because, I really thought about it. And I do subscribe to this idea. I think this is this is correct. So,
I think that's one of the reasons that I actually thought of writing the history of the Earth expansion. Because I think a lot of people don't actually realize how much actually history there is. That's it. That book there, how much history there is, and how it's developed over the years. It's really started off. A lot of the geologists were actually fundamental in actually bringing about the concept of continental drift, which then transferred into plate tectonics. So they were all key individuals, and a lot of them, when they continued on, they actually kept going and decided that Earth expansion was actually the cause of continental drift. And so all the authors there are all able to come in and give us all very unique sort of histories of how it developed. We've got authors from Australia, over in Poland, Germany, and Britain as well.
Yes.
So all of these were all key individuals, and they're all able to take us all the way through. I think, and it gives us a very interesting history, I think, of how this idea is developed outside the normal run of science.
Sure. And I think, and the other thing about the book, which is really interesting, is the first part of the book, which is fantastic. Congratulations, Stephen, on your history that you put together. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this book, it tells, and if you go back and you want to watch, Stephen gave a talk the week before on the book, and we talked about the book. But the most interesting aspect, I think, of the history of expansion tectonics is how close we came to actually, today, we would not be talking on a dissident naturalphilosophy.org group or dissident science YouTube channel. We would be discussing this at some grand university in the UK, the United States, or around the world, because it would have been the one that was accepted. We came so close.
Yeah, so close. It was just the tipping point, wasn't it? And it very nearly tipped over into Earth expansion, but it just flicked over the other way. And I think
Yeah.
most of the people who actually objected were the ones who were objecting to continental drift. And they decided we definitely can't accept this. We might possibly accept continental drift, but we can't possibly accept that the Earth has been
It's
expanding.
expanding. Oh yeah.
No.
I think it reminds me a lot of the choice. Unfortunately, we in America, it's somewhat embarrassing our politics. Somewhat embarrassing is an understatement, in my opinion. I mean, you look at who we are choosing between a reality TV host and a guy who's literally has Alzheimer's disease. I mean, there you go. I mean, which one are you going to pick? It's like, whoa.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, but
Uh,
unfortunately, I think with Earth expansion, it wasn't quite like that. We actually had a very good, very viable candidate. It just was at the time, it was coming too fast for that establishment to take those steps. So they took a step in a wrong direction. But I think with thanks to you, Stephen, thanks to James Maxwell, John Eichler, and all the other people out there who are giving a voice to the idea that the Earth is expanding, that it's gaining mass. I think we're getting more and more people who are starting to scratch their head, look at it, and say, you know what? I think this may be the right way to go. And if we get enough young people who are doing this, then one will write a dissertation, another one will write a dissertation, and the next thing you know, um, you'll have a pilgrimage at your door, and an entire industry of measuring paleogravity and PhDs. I hope that happens in our lifetime, Stephen. So keep eating healthy, do exercise, okay? So we can see this happen. But thank you so much. You want to give a few closing words before we drop off here? Go ahead.
Thank you very much for having me on your program again, David. And it's as always, it's been actually really good. Thank you.
Yes, I know. No problem. I know the English are so humble and aren't like we Americans who say, like Trump. Oh, this is the greatest talk that was ever given in science today, something like that. So, but anyways, thank you so much, and I want to thank again all the members of the CMPS who pay their dues. If you want to be part of the membership, it's like $35 a month. If you're retired, $50 a year, sorry, 35 a year or $50 a year. It helps sponsor these things like this video conferencing that we put on every year. We also have other services like when we write our proceedings. So if you have papers you want to publish, we do have a proceedings. You can see some of those in the back here. We're not going to have a conference this year, of course, because of the coronavirus, but we're going to be having it next year. We're not sure where. But thank you all who support the CMPS. And I want to thank also my listeners who are here in force today, all you people from Dissident Science. I will be coming live using the same platform on Friday, starting next Friday, Dissident Science face-to-face chats with me. So I appreciate all the patronage, not only on my channel, Dissident Science, but also on the CMPS as well. So thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. Next week we will will be Franklin Hugh, and they usually have open topics, and they talk everything physics and dissidence. So there's nothing that's sacred on the CMPS Saturday morning chats. We do stick to physics and cosmology. We don't talk about anything else more like history or evolution or anything like that. For now, we have as I tell people, we have enough to fight against physics and cosmology, let alone anything that has to do with politics or anything else. So thank you so much, everybody. Once again, thanks, Franklin Hugh. We'll be back next week at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're your host, Franklin Hugh. And if you want to give a talk, if you think you have something that other people want to hear that's scientifically based and has a firm, solid ground in science, we'd love to contact us. You can contact us through our websites. Again, I'll put those up here. These websites, go to those websites or contact emails. In fact, you can just put contact@naturalphilosophy.org or contact@sciencework. We'll get them, or David in front of those two as well. I'll get them, and we'll look to put you on here on Saturday morning, just like Stephen. So see you guys later. Ciao.